evening from Tel Aviv. Demonstrators here in Tel Aviv and in other Israeli cities took to the streets last night once again. They were protesting the new budget proposals put forth by Finance Minister Lapid. Protesters were less organized this year than they were 2 years ago, and certainly much smaller numbers turned out. One of the things a smart friend of mine said almost 2 years ago about the protests, the problem will occur after they finish protesting and nothing will have changed. Unfortunately, that's pretty much what's happened. They protested, there was a lot of noise, and nothing very much has changed. And there's very little that can change in these areas immediately. Of course, part of the problem is the issue that they're protesting against is the budget, but the real thing that's hurting most Israelis is the cost of living. And we had a reminder today of how bad the cost of living is at the moment when the Central Bureau of Statistics announced that the price of housing, both new and old homes, has gone up between 5 and 6% this year alone. We're only in May and it's already gone 5 to 6%. In dollar terms, it's gone up even more since the dollar has devalued in this country in the last few months. So the fact of the matter is pricing of housing continues to soar. Young couples can't afford it and they've taken to the streets. But it's not the budget they really should be protesting. It's housing, it's the cost of food and everything else. Meanwhile, on the budget front, marathon meetings have taken place all day long today between representatives of the Finance Ministry and Minister of Defense and Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as additional ministers, to discuss the defense budget. This is a yearly discussion that goes on every single year. The defense budget makes up the single largest element of the Israeli budget, and every year it keeps on growing. It has grown from 25 billion shekels in 2002, 2003, to 60 billion shekels today. Now, the fact of the matter is, it's not really out of line. That's the unfortunate fact. The American defense budget is $650 billion. The Israeli defense budget, depending on what the dollar is, $16, $17 billion. If you look at the size of our population, the size of the United States population, the $15 to $17 billion works out very easily to $650 billion. Of course, there are a lot of people who think the American defense budget is too high and is unsustainable. Certainly the Israeli one is hard to sustain, but while the United States has been fighting some active wars, it's hard to say that Israel has a lot of friends in the neighborhood. And of course, the biggest problem of all is the uncertainty. On one hand, those who want to cut the budget are saying, look, we don't have large armies to fight. The Egyptians don't have tank forces. The Syrians at this point don't have tank forces. We will not have to fight a large conventional war anytime soon. The other side of that is, A, what's going to happen with Iran, and B, there's so much uncertainty. So it's a very hard decision to make. Cut more money from the defense budget, which is always money can be found, but usually they'll cut the things that are not necessary to cut. The one area that was decided not to cut was military pensions, and the one biggest expense that Israel has is military pensions. Israel has the same problem the United States does when police retire at a young age. Military people retire at 45, and they receive up to 70% of their salary for the rest of their lives. That's a heavy burden for the country to carry. Meantime, on the outside, things have been kind of interesting to say the least. On the Turkish-Syrian border, a bomb went off. The Turks clearly blamed the Syrians for the attack. The bomb went off near the town of Banyos. Banyos on the Syrian side. This took place on the Turkish side. In Banyos, the Alawites massacred hundreds of Sunnis, including men, women, and children last week. And it seems they've attempted to extend that by trying to kill Sunnis in Turkey, many of them refugees who are sitting on the Turkish side of the border. The Turks responded with threats, but also said they're not going to be drawn into a ground fight in Syria. One last event took place last night. Rafsanjani, once considered a conservative candidate for the presidency of Iran, today he's considered more liberal. As everyone else moved to the right, he stayed in the center and is now considered liberal. He's also an opponent of the Supreme Commander and an opponent of the present president. He decided at the last minute to run for the presidency. His decision to run for the presidency has now added a great deal of question as who may win this election. And while the conservatives had hoped there would be an election with many people running but no real choices, there is now a real choice and a real chance for maybe some change in Iran. Certainly there'll be a real election, and certainly there's a lot for us to watch and see what happens in the next few weeks as an election nears at the end of June in Iran. That's the way it is tonight here in Tel Aviv. Good night and have a great week.